Hey guys, Scott here with Trilogy Talk, and I am back with another episode. So, what's been going on since the last time I've talked to you? Well, not really a lot, which is why, again, there's been a little bit of a gap. Did a little bit of traveling. I think last time we talked, I went to Peoria for the PDGA World Championships, where I got to follow the FPO chase card for both rounds 4 and 5. Kristen Tatar, Rebecca Cox, Sarah Holcomb. I can't remember her name. I don't remember her name. But either way, I was there. And then shortly after that, I went to Massachusetts, to Maple Hill. Got to play the famed Maple Hill Gold. I got to play Maple Hill White, which was a totally different experience. I got to play a course called 501, which is another private course about 15-20 minutes away. Might even be a little bit further than that from Maple Hill. Fabulous course. I loved it. I personally may have liked it better than Maple Hill. So I don't know for sure. I would like to have gotten a couple more rounds in each one, but I really enjoyed it. And then we played a course, a local public park called Newton Hill. And that was for the 2019 United States Masters, Tim Selinsky Masters. The U.S. Masters is named after Tim Selinsky, who was the one who originally created the event, was a big mover and shaker many years back, but and passed away 2009-ish, 2010. So shortly after that, they named the tournament after him. And then after that, it actually started to move around. So just a little bit of history about the U.S. Masters with the Tim Selinsky. I had met him. I've actually sat in groups with him, but I don't know that I ever exchanged words with him. So it's kind of like my experience with Ed Hedrick. I've met Ed Hedrick 2 or 3 times, but I don't know that I've physically, maybe like a hello or something like that, but I just know I've been in circles, groups, tables with those guys and listened. And just to listen to those guys, especially back in those times when I started in the mid-90s, late 90s, I was very much a lot like a lot of the players who watch this, recreational players, intermediate players, who were just learning and just trying to gobble up as much information about the game as possible. The game that we love so much, so just to be there. So anyways, it was super exciting time. It was coming from Kansas City, which we're still in the 90s, maybe finally starting to get down to the high 80s, but it was ultimately 60s most of the time that we were there. So very cool. Leaves and stuff were starting to change, starting to get those autumn reds a little bit, things like that. But as soon as you pull up there and you get into Maple Hill, I mean, you just can feel a presence. I mean, it's, again, such a gorgeous part of the country. The roads are like 1800s roads. No shoulders, houses and buildings 2 feet off of what we would call a shoulder. Windy roads. So, like I said, go to 501. It was probably 15-20 minutes, might have been longer. You probably would have got there in half this time if you didn't have to go through all the windy roads. But again, just a great area. And then as soon as you pull up and you get in that parking lot, you can oversee hole 1 right away. And it's just amazing. You see all the Christmas trees that are there. It's on a Christmas tree farm. Ultimately, it was where the course plays through. I'm not sure how much the park itself utilizes that, but I know it changes out throughout the year. Just don't know what level that happens to. But you see the signs from Maple Hill, and then you see, if you go to the parking lot and you look to the left, like I said, you see hole 1. Very shortly off to the right, you see the green of hole 18, where you've seen a lot of really good finishes in the past years for the various tournaments that have been out there, the MVP Open, the Marshall Street, the Vibram Open. So there's been a lot of history that's happened on that 18th green, whether it's positive or sometimes tournaments have been lost on that hole too. It's not a very big green. It is a little bit of a tight window. Depending on where the shot coming to the green is from, it can really dictate how tight that line can be. So again, going up there and it's just right away, you get goosebumps and nerves. And it was one of my bucket list places that I really wanted to go to. And this year I had the opportunity to go to 2. I went to Smuggler's Notch in Vermont, and then now I went to Maple Hill, which I'll talk about the comparison here a little bit later on in the episode. But gorgeous day. So anyways, we get there, and I travel with a group of ultimately about 6 Kansas City guys. 10 Kansas City guys total went, but we stayed in a Airbnb style house. And actually, before I talk about the rest of the Maple Hill course, let me tell you about, it wasn't Airbnb, but it was one of those companies like an Airbnb. So we stayed on this house that was owned by the Southwick family. Those who don't know, Southwicks are ultimately the ones who own at least the Pyramid Course, the Marshall Street. There's a relation to that family. I don't know if it's the Southwick that specifically owns Maple Hill, but there's definitely a relationship between that. Steve Dodge, who is one of the ones with Maple Hill, is a cousin to Jason Southwick, who owns Marshall Street. I'm pretty sure that information is correct. If it's not 100% correct, it's pretty close. There might just be a few details there that I'm misquoting. But this family ultimately owns this whole section. And we've seen Southwick things throughout as we were traveling. But anyways, our house was on the Pyramids Course property. Literally, so we step out the back door, 600 feet from our back door was hole 14. If I start walking towards hole 14, once I pass the tree line, I look to the right, another 600 feet off to my right is the Marshall Street course. 600 feet the other direction, if I was going straight to my left when I walk out, is hole 15 and 16. So it was pretty neat to have that course so close to us. A really old wooden cabin style house, nooks and crannies everywhere we turned. We were there from Wednesday through Monday, and I feel like every day we looked, I'd go into a room and I'd find like new drawers or new pull-outs, new cubby holes. It's really neat, this style, and that just kind of goes to show you the nature of where you're at up in the northeastern part of the United States. So then I got to have a lot of fun with the food and the drinks and things like that. Lobster rolls, and there's a pretty cool beer places. So if you've never been up in that area, great place to go. But back to topic on hand, Maple Hill, the U.S. Zelinsky. Great time, great courses, great place to be. I don't want to get too much negative. Probably the only disappointment, the tournament itself had a lot of issues. And I don't want to get into too much details. Jonathan Ray has a post out there. Dave Felberg, Steve Rako, Patrick Brown. A lot of them have made comments to talk about it. PDGA, it's such to a point that the PDGA, Joe Shogoloff, whatever, who's the executive director for the PDGA, he actually sent an email to all the participants of the PDGA apologizing for the situations that they're working on it, and even gave a discount to the 2020 U.S. Tim Zelinsky Championships, which for me, coincidentally, is 90 minutes from my house. So that's pretty interesting and pretty unique. So one of the things I kind of wanted to talk to, so this tournament, like I said, was a great time. I enjoyed, and I'm going to back up even again, before I talk about the tournament and kind of where I want to go to with what went wrong with it. Let's go back to the Maple Hill course. That's what we're talking about. So as you play through the course, 18 holes, every hole has multiple pin placements, multiple baskets. They have gold positions, white positions, blue positions, and red positions. And not everyone has their own necessarily pad or basket. Several of them share. There's a couple where all four are, there's only one and they all share it. But there's a lot of options. So that was kind of neat in itself. So like I said, we played the golds and we played the whites. And they were two totally different courses. Yeah, the golds were much better, but the whites were still very interesting. A little bit more deuce or die on the whites, but there were a couple shots there that made you really think that water comes into play. And there's a couple shots that there are safe routes to go, but the water shots look so simple that you just want to go for them. But then when you go to throw them, those lines are really tight. Depends on what kind of winds are coming off of the water, can really affect what's going on. Matter of fact, I think it's hole 5, played out of Maple Hill. I lost a fusion evidence. It's in the water. May she rest in peace. So I played a tournament this past weekend. I forgot to replace it in the bag, and I really needed that disc. So as soon as I got home yesterday, I put fusion evidence in my bag, and I am good to go. But a lot of old school rock walls that part of the country used to define property lines, it's set up throughout the course. And then you get to some of the iconic holes, like hole 14, which is from the golds. You're up high and you're shooting 400 and some feet to a basket that's on the bank. It is all water. There is kind of a dam levee along the left side, which I always thought I just will bail out over there if I didn't want to sail across that water. Well, right on the other side of that is another very much smaller pond, but it's in a very prime landing spot. And in between that dam and that little pond off to the left, there's a whole wall of trees. And if you happen to get caught into those wall of trees, sure, it saves you from going out of bounds, but your second shot, unless you get extremely lucky where you land, is a blind shot to the basket, typically aiming towards the water. And again, there's only a 30-foot width down that path. I mean, it does open up as you get closer and goes back downhill, but you bring that water, the main pond, back into play. And just to see that is goosebumps alone, because those are the types of shots and types of things you see from all these videos. And when you see the live coverage from like this past MVP Open, I watched every round for the guys and the girls, and I had a really fresh mind when I went into those holes. And it was really interesting. Again, you walk up and you're like, oh, this hole looks a lot easier. Oh, this looks way harder. Hole 1 is an example. You can't tell a lot in the guys just because the way the video angles are playing, but they throw and they're throwing over this big pond. And we see the shots just landing into the Christmas tree farm, but you don't see how much they have to carry to get over that water. For me, I never once could get over the water. I had to bail out to the left. And even my bailouts probably would have been in the last third of the water. I only saw a handful of people, at least on my skill level, even attempt it, and very few could get over. So the sheer iconic presence of those holes alone just made the whole thing pretty exciting. So again, there's Maple Hill. If you ever get the chance to go, it's great to go. 501, private course, up and down big hills, big long course. Again, just very beautiful, those rock wall outlines. They have 2 sets of baskets. I can't remember if they had more than 1 tee. I feel like they only had 1 set of tees, but they had greens and blues. And they were playing on Prodigy baskets. Maple Hill plays on MVP baskets. And then we also had the Newton Hill course, which is a local course. It was pretty much played around this one big hill. You're pretty much up, down, maybe along the side of the hill. A lot shorter course. It measured a little over 5,000 feet, where the other courses were 8,000 to 9,000 feet. Again, public park. It was a good course. Did it quite measure up to the other 2 courses? No. I mean, if I lived there, I absolutely would play it. It was a fun track. It was a fun course to play. But it was comparing a 3-star course to 2 5-star courses. Still a great time though. Like I said, if I lived there, I'd be very proud of the course. A lot of the locals there seem to be very proud of it. I only got to play it the one time. I actually played it blind going into the tournament. But again, a lot of good holes, but it's still a very wooded, technical course. Honestly, the biggest problem I had with it was just the pads. But that's something they can fix, and I'm sure they will fix it over time. I think Steve Dodge even acknowledged about those pads. The other stuff that the people might talk about with the course is a little bit of trash, things like that on the ground. But again, those things come with time. People clean it. And honestly, majority of the stuff that was on the ground was so small, unless you had a glass magnet or some kind of trash magnet, it was going to be super hard to pick up. I can only imagine what kind of work went into it to make it as clean as it was. So, but either way, Newton Hill, I still loved it, giving that one respect. 501 Maple Hill, definitely the cream of the crop, and I loved being there. So, all right, guys. So, I'm gonna go just talk briefly about the tournament itself. And I kind of talked about, I don't want to talk about any details, and I don't want to talk about this tournament, but this is ultimately where the conversation is going to come from. And this is really aiming at the tournament directors that are out there, but also as a player. It helps you, again, you understand what a tournament director should be doing and what you should expect from a tournament director. And again, it kind of follows a little bit of my TD 101 videos that I had put out. But there are some basic things that you need to do as a tournament director. When you run a tournament, you ultimately should run a tournament the way you want to play in a tournament. So and across the board, if you have one course, that's easy. If you have 2 courses, though, you need to treat both courses the exact same. If you have 3 courses, you need to treat all 3 the exact same. The experience doesn't change when you go from course to course. The experience might change as far as the technicality or the course itself, but the function of the tournament, the way it runs, should ultimately be the same. Meaning, simple things, your scorecards should be of a quality. You shouldn't have to write and use a pencil and your pencil go through the paper. I'm not saying you have to have full, thick cardstock, glossy, full color print. crazy expensive ones, you don't need to spend a lot of money, but it's not very expensive to print black and white on normal 100-pound white cardstock paper. I do it for every tournament that I do, and most people do. So, but it's just the little consistencies like that. Bathrooms are so important. 95% of the field are guys, but even for guys, bathrooms are important. And even for women, it's got to be even that much more difficult. You need to have a bathroom at least halfway through. If a course goes 1 through 9 and comes back to home base, and then 9 through 18, it's okay to have one there. But having another one someplace else, if you go 1 and you don't come back around to 18, it is a very good idea to have a bathroom. Bathroom porta potties, depending on your area, probably vary, but most of the time I've seen probably about $100. $100 is a costly expense, but it's an expense that needs to be figured in to somewhere that you need it. And you get knowing your group and the time. I mean, I'm just kind of giving generalized details. You know your areas better than anybody, but those are little things you can have out there. Water is huge. Having 5 or 10 gallon things of water, you should have those out there at least every 6 holes if you can. Now, some courses like this tournament I just ran this past weekend, there was no way for me to get anywhere but hole 1, 10, and 18. So that's where I put the water. Most tournaments, I want to put them on 1, 4, 9, or every 3, 4, 5, 6 holes apart. Sometimes you can't do that. But at least at minimum, if you cannot have the water out there. Now, again, some of this is common sense for you players too. You should be going out to a course as if there is no water. So you're helping the tournament director not have to have as much or less chance that it runs out. But tournament directors, last thing you want to do is have to call an ambulance because someone passed out of dehydration out on the course. Even if it's 60 or 50 degrees outside, it's still hot and everybody's body processes that water different. Save yourself, save the tournament. Even if you only use a quarter of the water, it's something that the players need, and it makes the tournament look so much better. It's just those little things. So again, those are just kind of a reminder of things that I've seen from these past tournaments that aren't done. Caddy books. You don't have to have a caddy book. You don't have to spend a ton of money to have a book full of ads and all of that kind of stuff. But what you need at minimum is a digital footprint of the course and the rules. A map if you have it. Again, you don't even have to print it out. I've done it many times where I print one out, laminate it, put it at hole 1, and I say if you want it, take a picture of it. I also email it to the players, and I put it wherever I have my social media stuff at so people can save it to their phone. And I will tell them that please make a copy of this, save it to your phone, download the PDF so you have it on site for the course. For those who aren't social media savvy, that's when you have the one on site, even if you have to print. So even there, you don't have to print out a ton. Yes, printing more makes it a little bit that little extra effort, but I also understand the cost and the waste, resource waste of throwing away those pieces of paper. So even a lot of my big tournaments, I don't make full big caddy books any longer, but I make sure that the players have those details. And if you're gonna follow a T sign, then make sure that it's known well ahead of time and take pictures of those T signs. Get the digital copy of those T signs, or ahead of time, write those details down. I mean, yes, you could tell people to do the T signs, but it looks so much better when you have that information for them. At least a synopsis, a glimpse of what they're gonna do as opposed to going into a blind. Also, if you're going to run a tournament and you have other staff, so you have, say you're doing tee times and someone who's announcing, make sure that those players have an idea of what is going on. They should be just as much a master of that course for the basic parts of what needs to happen at hole 1. They don't need to be an official per se. They don't have to know all the holes and stuff, but they need to be able to instruct of this is where the bathroom's at, this is where the water's at, and this is how you're going to play the course by saying either follow all the directions on the tee sign, here's the map, in the rules, take a picture, or hand out the sheet. They don't need to know much more than that, but they have to at least be that masterful to get people out on the course. So again, those are just some really basic pencils and stuff. You know, those are, again, nice touches. A lot of people are using digital anymore. Most people have a pencil on there, but if you have no pencils and you happen to get a card or 3, 4, 5 that have no pencils as well, it just makes unnecessary tension and unnecessary scrambling. Now the PDGA has just recently released this past week their scoring app or scoring extension off their browser, pdga.com/score. And that's a pretty interesting feature. I used it a lot actually in my past platypus tournament that I just ran this past weekend. It was neat, so I'm curious to see where we end up going with that. Kind of sidetrack the whole pencil part. But again, just having those basic details when a player checks in. As a player, making sure you know those things ahead of time. Don't go in with the assumption of that stuff's going to be there. Make sure you know that stuff. And sometimes maybe if you haven't seen it within a reasonable amount of time, make a post or ask that question. Maybe the TD's just been busy and overlooked it. I've done that many times. Someone will say, hey, do we know in the layout? And then it clicks, oh, I need to get that layout. I already have it done. And then I'll post it all. And sometimes that little bit of help goes a long way. So, all right. So there's my little rant about basic functionality of TDs. But let's not let that take away from Maple Hill. Maple Hill was super awesome. Had a really good time. All right, so this past weekend was the Green Mountain Championships, which was a Disc Golf Pro Tour event out at Smuggler's Notch. It is the same track that I went to for the PDGA Masters World Championships this past year. We got to play Brewster's Ridge and Fox Run. Both excellent courses. So they had the Green Mountain Championship, which is a Jeff Spring production. Jeff Spring is the new director of the Disc Golf Pro Tour as of just a few weeks ago, taking over for Steve Dodge. So it's great to see him. I'm really excited to see what him and his crew are going to do for the Disc Golf Pro Tour going forward. I've ultimately been very happy with everything. I commend Steve Dodge for everything he's done. Whether or not he finished on the highest note or not is can be debated. But either way, he started all of that. He created it. It was his brainchild and his vision that started it. He was definitely a great person to do everything he did up to that time. It might have been time for him to leave, and that's the way a lot of jobs are. Sometimes one person who creates it isn't necessarily the guy to push it forward, and the guy who's pushing it forward may not always be the brainchild to have created it. So a little bit of rabbit hole. Didn't mean to jump off of that. Let's go back to Green Mountain Championship. Both are great treks. I actually, between playing Smuggler's Notch and Maple Hill, Smuggler's Notch. I liked Green Mountain. Green Mountain, Smuggler's Notch may be my favorite place I've ever been. There's one or two, Sandy Point, Northwoods, USDGC. Those are two of the other tops that I have for me. But Smuggler's Notch, I really want to go again because I want to feel that presence again. Those other two I just mentioned too, I've been many times. I've only been to Smuggler's Notch once. Again, it's a part of the country, kind of like being in Massachusetts. This one's in Vermont. You got those rock walls, mountains, canyons, the greens, the old school or old style houses and businesses that look like they're from the 1800s, the food, the drinks, just a lot of really cool things. But Smuggler's Notch, the course, you got Brewster's Ridge, which is a very tight technical course. And then you've got Fox Run, which is a more open course. It's not a wide open bomber course. There are definitely some bomber holes, but there's a little bit of a mix, a little bit more lean to the open side, but still a lot of out of bounds that'll catch you off track if you're not paying attention, and it'll cost you strokes. Where Brewster's Ridge will cost you strokes if you can't hit a line, Fox Run will cost you strokes if you can't keep it in bounds. So both very good courses. This past weekend, looking up the details, got my phone here. This past weekend with the FPO division, so a little bit of changing of the guard these past few weeks. So this weekend, congratulations to Sarah Holcomb with Team MVP. She won, I believe it's her first Disc Golf Pro Tour win of 2019. Very good girl. She switched over to MVP and took her a little bit, in my opinion, to kind of get where she's at now, to get those new discs mastered and just get that comfort. But it looks like she's there. She's slowly building up. You have Kristen Tatar, who's from Estonia, who won last weekend in the Canadian Open or Canadian Championship to beat Paige for the first time in like 2 months. So Kristen Tatar gets second. She's had multiple seconds, thirds since she's been here in the United States on her little tour. I don't know how much longer she's going to be over here, but I'm excited to watch her. Sarah Holcomb for the win. Paige Pierce struggled a little bit there, it looked like. Not really sure. I haven't heard too much about what happened, but she ultimately finished in first place, but 12 strokes out of first place. Rebecca Cox, Team Latitude 64 member, with third place. Kristen Tartar, second place. Sarah Holcomb with first place. I have not physically watched any of the video for any of this yet. Actually, as soon as I'm done recording these, I'm going to go watch at least the Brewster Ridge, because I want to watch those courses again. So it's pretty exciting. I did watch a little, so let me retract a little bit. I didn't watch any of the FPO. I watched very little of one day, like the last 4 holes. I think it was round 3 of the MPO. But on the MPO division, Paul McBeth, unstoppable. I'd really almost like to do a video or a debate on comparing this year to his 2015 Grand Slam year. I'm not sure. I feel like he's got all. Does he have all the majors already? I can't remember. But he won by 9 strokes over the next closest person. But I need to mention second place, tying a course record, shooting a negative 11. Chris Clemens, Team Dynamic Disc player Chris Clemens, ultimately finished in second place, followed by Nicola Castro, Chris Dickerson, and Simon Lizotte for your top 5. But Paul, again, winning by 9 strokes, and he won pretty handily going into that third round. I can't remember the exact numbers, but he only had Chris Dickerson by a couple. He took a triple bogey, I believe, on hole 18, where Chris, I don't remember if he took a birdie or par, but it ultimately closed the gap. Going into hole 18 in round 3, Paul McBeth had a multiple stroke lead, closed that up. So for him to then go out and win by 9, going into that round, only up by a few to win by 9. Everybody else in that card shot worse. He still shot a negative 8 on that final round, which is still a great round. It's only 3 strokes off what Clemens did, who had the hot round. So again, pretty exciting. Glad to see that. I can't wait to go back and watch the videos. It's kind of sad. So the positive, again, to these courses is, like I said, they're so beautiful and they're just a great part of the country. But it's kind of like, to me, it's like football season starting. I love football season. I love being at these courses. But that also means we're at the end of we're getting to the end of the disc golf season. We're getting to the end of summer. I am looking forward to the fall and the cooler weather coming up here. But it also means that disc golf season for a lot of players is going to slow down or stop. I know it doesn't stop for everybody if you're in those lucky parts of the country, but it does stop for many of us, or at least slows it down. So, all right, so those are what I have on those courses. If you haven't had a chance to check those out or go to those places, check them out. If you don't have the ability to go check them out, watch those videos. The Selinsky videos are created by Gatekeeper. I believe they did round 3 and 4. The the Green Mountain Championship videos are starting to roll out now. Watch those videos. Go back and watch those past years. Super exciting. Great places to go. So until next time, keep sharing the Trilogy love with the world. See ya.